good input from you as well for the rest of today. So we'll kick off, if that's all right, and go through what we're going to cover today. So we'll go through the background of the return to rugby. So you'll know it if you're from an English club as the Pitch Up to Rugby programme. And if you're from a Scottish club, you'll know it as the Everyone's Game programme. If you're from a Welsh club, it'll be the Pathway to Participation. And it's all encompassed in this big return to rugby campaign, so we'll go through in a second. Our friends from Unlimited are going to go through some youth research findings that some you may recognise in terms of the topic we're covering, and hopefully some might be useful to consider in your own kind of activation of this. We'll talk through what the national campaign is, what your role is, and what resources will support you with to help with that campaign. And then we'll have some breakout rooms at the end where we'll get a chance to kind of add in a little bit more and just tell you a little bit more specifics around what each union is doing to support you as a club. From that, we'll get going. So just give you a bit of background on where we've come from. Some of the clubs may be involved in some of those programs we talked about, whether that's the Everyone's Game or the Pitch Up to Rugby from last season. This is the second or third season, depending on which union you come from. And just after the pandemic, the National Lottery came on board with a lot of sports to provide some resource and funding to encourage people back to sport after such a long layout. Obviously, rugby is one of the most biggest affected sports, had the most restrictions on compared to a lot of other sports. And our kind of coming back to have a full season from September was a real positive step. You know, it was real great that the amount of work the clubs had to do to get to that stage is well, it's worth recognising in terms of the efforts needed to go through all those protocols and keep in touch and engage those players. So really successful. I think from the English RFU's perspective, we had around 600 clubs take part in a pitch up front. I know the Scottish RFU, a real focus on the under-20s playing offer, embedding a real good culture, which is a theme we'll hopefully kind of transition into tonight as well. So for this season, our focus is going to turn to what is still a really big challenge for rugby across the three unions, and that's transitioning players, younger players, into adult rugby. It still remains one of the biggest areas for drop-off, whether that's in rugby, but across a number of sports as well, and it's particularly more prevalent for male rugby players. Now, not every club has got an age grade section. We're aware of that, so we'll try and ensure that the focus for tonight is only about how you can transition players from age grade to adult rugby, but also about how we can support reaching a younger audience and bringing players to your club should you not have a mini and junior section. We'll talk through some of the reasons why we think and the research we've got about why people drop out of the game, and some solutions that we've seen, clubs and models of good practice. And we'll also give you an overview of what the national campaign is we're intending to run that will support you in trying to attract some of those players that have either moved away from your club or you're trying to support into your adult section. And with that, I want to pass over to Peter, who's going to take you through some of those findings.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm just going to take a quick 5 minutes to give you a quick overview of some of the research findings we've got into the age group 16 to 22 before I hand on to Jess and Ryan, and we find out from the horse's mouth what their experiences were like. I guess the start point for this is that when we ask teenagers whether they're likely to continue into adult rugby, we're getting a sort of half and half split between those that intend to and those that don't. And that might seem a big number for some of you clubs, but it might appear a small number for others. But I guess it throws up a couple of key challenges. And the first is, you know, of that 50% that are intending to continue into adult rugby, how can we make that transition as smooth as possible and make sure as many of those 50% as possible actually get through and cross the line into adult rugby. But it also raises a second challenge, which is, you know, the other 50% of this age group are intending to drop out of rugby before they get to 18. You know, how can we change their minds? How can we adapt the experience that we give them to make sure that they continue playing rugby for longer? One of the key things, and it almost goes without saying, I guess, but it's an important thing just to kind of recognise, is that for these kids, what comes out of the research is that playing sport is primarily about enjoyment and escapism. And I think that's a really important reminder to ourselves that even as they transition through from a kind of youth section where maybe the emphasis was perhaps more on fun and participation into a senior section where there's inevitably a little bit more of an emphasis on performance and points and promotion and avoiding relegation and things like that. We still need to remember that actually the reason why this age group really wants to play sport and play rugby is for that enjoyment and a kind of bit of escapism from the pressures of life and studies. So perhaps not a surprise, but something to always bear in mind. This is still about enjoyment and escapism, not just about performance. But what's really important from a rugby point of view as well is that what comes out of the research is that being part of a team is also a really key emotional benefit that they get out of this. And you can see there it's actually the most important factor why they continue to play rugby. And it comes way ahead of some of the other things like competitiveness, physicality, and even winning as motivations for continuing to stay in the game. And therefore that idea of belonging is something that we really need to kind of amplify as we go forward and to help retain 16 to 22-year-olds in the game as much as possible. And you'll see us come back to that when we talk about the national campaign and how we're really going to try and engage with this audience. So enjoyment and belonging and escapism are all kind of real strong pulls from the research as to why this age group continue to play. But of course, we all know that it's a real period of change for them as well, which kind of throws things up in the air, both inside and outside of rugby. So from an inside rugby point of view, they're migrating from youth rugby into the Colts, into potentially into university rugby, into senior rugby. The dynamics are changing slightly in terms of no longer playing just with their year group and their mates. And there are sort of heavier demands being placed on them in lots of cases. Again, this is all coming from the research on training and playing because the physicality is increasing. So they're all things that are sort of changing as they're going through this this age period. But also, of course, they are transitioning outside of rugby as well. So there's a lot of change pressures put upon them outside of the game, and they're going through these kind of transitional life moments that are changing their routines, their aspirations, the sorts of things they're interested in, and the way they spend their time. So we know that they are, they have important exams, particularly at 16, 18, and at the end of university where they do finals. And if they're finishing school, so they're kind of transitioning into jobs or universities, or they're going into gap years where they're traveling and they're kind of stopping playing rugby because they're traveling. It creates a bit of a point at which they move away from the game. Even things like girlfriends, boyfriends, right? We're all familiar with wanting to spend more time with them, and that it potentially takes them away from rugby, as does the fun of university life, as does, starting to work and earn some money at this age group, at this age as well. So we know it's a massive transitional time, both outside and inside rugby, and therefore some of the key kind of reasons why they drop out according to the research are kind of listed here. And of course it's a sort of big interlocking picture really, because not necessarily one of these things is the main factor. There could be a whole combination of factors that are at play here, but certainly the growing importance of studies or work is a factor, and we're seeing that this generation is studying more than previous generations have, and so that's anything that gets in the way of that is potentially going to take them away from rugby. There's a change in the social dynamics at the club, so they're moving into teams where they don't know the players quite so well. That's changing the dynamics, and one of the key reasons that they play in terms of the idea of being a team and belonging. Maybe there's a pressure to perform that's coming through the research sometimes, so it's less about participation and more about performing. So we need to be mindful of that as clubs. There are some players who just don't feel good enough or ready to move into adult rugby. Tricky on that, because we need to find places for them to go if we're going to keep them in the game. You've also got, as you know, youngsters choosing other sports to go and play, and in some cases those fit more flexibly around their new lifestyles, and we know that gym membership and running and cycling and things like that are all increasing amongst this audience, so they become temptations to move away from the kind of structured sport of rugby and into those kind of more flexible things that they can do in their own time or with just a couple of other mates. There's also a definite trend towards kind of trimming down the sports that they do as they get older. So they might be playing rugby alongside other sports in their younger years, but of course, as they get into this age group, they start to trim down, particularly because of all these other distractions that they've got, and we need to make sure that rugby is the sport that they keep. Of course, there's occasional concerns about rugby, about injury as well, and important that we all do what we can to kind of suppress that. And then it may be that there's a whole group of these, or it is that there's a whole group of kids here who are playing at school but never actually make that transition across to a club, and actually, stepping over the threshold of a club is potentially a daunting thing for them to do, and not something that they'll do unless they're given a real easy opportunity to come and do it. So a real whistle-stop tour of the key things why they stay, and the key things or the key reasons why some of them disappear, which I think is important to have in mind as we go and think about solutions to keep them playing the game for longer. So that was the research, but we'll hear directly from Jess and Ryan and see their experiences now.
Thanks very much, Peter. Like you can see on there, and hopefully some of those reasons and the drivers and blockers for players will resonate with you as clubs. And it's good to see some people put in the chat now some of the challenges they're facing about leaving or having gap years and trying to keep them back there. Really happy to be joined by Ryan and Jess, who have successfully made the transition from age grade to adult, but will hopefully be able to also talk us through their journeys and what they did, and also just kind of speak for some of their friends and they know has lapsed as well. So Jess, Ryan, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. Just the first question to you, Jess. You've heard a few things there around why people stay in the game or leave the game. Does some resonate with you? Obviously, you've made the transition. What are some of the reasons? And do you know players who have left the game, and what are some of the reasons there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say almost everything mentioned. I know at least one person that's probably left for one of those reasons. The biggest deterrent that I've heard is going from that structured progression of minis, under 12s, under 15s, under 18s, and then to having no age cap at all is quite intimidating, especially for, as you said, some people who think that they're not capable of competing at that level. It's also the fact that, with school, you're with all your buddies and you have like that close relationship and that social side of it, and going into a new team, it takes quite a while to build that up again with a group of new people. For myself, it was still quite an intimidating move, but it was made a lot easier because I knew one of the coaches from some of the under 18 stuff I did, and he made a real effort of contacting me personally to ask what I was thinking about senior rugby, and kind of recruiting me and my friend who's in the same boat. So
fantastic. So that kind of personal approach really supported you in managing that transition and that nervousness of taking the step.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Ryan, what about yourself? It's similar, or any other reasons and people you've seen leave the game?
Yeah, I think similar. Pretty much every reason which they stated, there's probably someone I know that's quit for them reasons or stopped playing as much. I think the biggest one for my team was a lot of people moved away for colleges and sixth forms, and then when they went on to uni, moved away from them as well. And maybe, I don't think many of them played for new teams. They might play for the uni team, but the local teams, they didn't know any the teams around there, so they didn't want to just go join a team where they didn't know anyone there. Yeah. And then a lot of the time they didn't want to travel back from uni or college, and because they didn't progress at the start of the season and didn't go to the pre-season training and like the social sides of the things, they didn't know anyone in the teams they're going into, so they didn't want to go back to the team they played for beforehand, which kind of just pushed them out of the club completely.
Right, okay. And what were some of the reasons that helped you kind of cross that bridge?
Well, we did so when we came from under 16s to Colts, we had a social where the teams were mixed between the Colts and the Colts that were going to be stay-ins the year above us and our age group. And we just had a game and then some drinks afterwards in the bar. So everyone kind of got to know everyone to play with. The teams were very switched all the time, just making sure it was a fair game. Everyone just had a bit of a laugh. It wasn't anything serious. And then same happened when I went from Colts to adults. There was another game. Everyone, hundreds of people there, just 10 minutes. Some people playing the whole game, just getting everyone involved with everyone, having a laugh, just seeing what everyone's about, and everyone obviously being friendly with each other, not just trying to run for everyone, just showing off the skills and just having a laugh at everyone else there.
Yeah, so that positive culture is something that I think Scottish RFU focus really hard on, is like creating that really positive culture, not trying to show anyone up, just being really inclusive. I think just seeing people in the chat there, people are talking about touch rugby, I think it's a fantastic way to to do that, to bridge that gap, to do what Ryan's saying there, whether that's the touch union within the RFU or whether that's Tartan Touch with it in Scotland. Jess, coming back to you a second as well, you mentioned there about that personal touch. I think, is there anything else you think clubs can do in terms of helping players to bridge that gap?
Yeah, just in general, if there's the facilities for it, just making that contact with the under 18 equivalent of the club or even local schools. Like I didn't play for a club until senior rugby, so I was in a school kind of in the middle of nowhere. But having someone come in and maybe run a training session, or at least just kind of introduce themselves and get to know people a wee bit on a personal basis, so you're not going in completely blind, you at least know someone by name.
Yeah.
Would make just a huge difference, and keeping things fun.
Perfect. Yeah, I think the two key things there, that personal approach, keeping it fun and enjoyable, echoes what Ryan said there as well. Ryan, we talked just earlier before also around, if we've not got an age grade, if we're not making that step from 16, 17, or players have moved away, gone to university, how would you suggest that we could get in contact with some of those players, some of your peers who maybe have not made that return back to the club yet?
Doing like reunion games, maybe. I know we had one. We have a under 16 game that happened last year, just as we got out of COVID, and my club do a under 23s game against another local club. It's just a friendly thing. It's getting everyone from that age group. So obviously not just your age group, but the people you play Colts with, and just the younger people from the club who are playing for the first team or quit when they played at under 16s, but still have a passion for the game. It's just getting everyone back together. And it does bring quite a few new faces into the club, and it does end up bringing people to stay for a bit. Some might not enjoy it as much and realise that rugby's not the same as it was when they played when they were a bit younger, but it does definitely help bringing more people together and seeing the people they used to play rugby with and bring that old social side, especially from schools. They might not have seen each other since secondary school, and now they're 23 years old, got a career and everything, and just moved back to the local area.
Perfect. Yeah, good points. It's a thing we looked at as well. I know clubs have done this as well, these little pockets of that is, but if we really want to support that younger audience or transition, there's some real key points. How do we make a personal touch? How do we really create connections? How do we bridge that gap in terms of introducing people through really fun, enjoyable activities with no pressure, or you're using reunions in order to rebuild some friendships, and those friendships is something we're going to pick up now in terms of that national campaign. So Jess, Ryan, thanks so much for joining us tonight and sharing your views on that. You've volunteered. Well, I say you volunteered. I've asked you that you'd happily stay around for the next kind of few minutes and just answer some questions on the chat. So, clubs, if you do have any questions for Ryan and Jess, please feel free to ask them on the chat box. If you could address it to everyone, because the same question might be on someone else's on mine. So feel free to add those in. But for now, I'll hand over to Andy to talk to that national campaign and build on that kind of that friendship idea.
Well, thanks, Dave, and thanks, Jess, Ryan, as well. Really good to hear your insights into it. So I'm just going to talk you through a bit of the campaign that we've been developing at a national level, but then also how it can sort of go down to support you at that club level as well, which is obviously a key part of this programme. So we've approached this with a two-pronged attack, really, in how we approach it. So there will be a national campaign over the top of all this, and really that is about reinforcing the emotional benefits of continuing to play rugby, really pulling upon some of those heartstrings. And I'm going to talk a bit more around how we're going to be developing that campaign. But to support this, we really need your support at the club level as well. And really that localization and you talking to them firsthand is a key part of reaching this audience. So we're going to be giving you sort of advice and help to really create that supportive culture, ease that transition, and really help these players stay in the game, encourage them to want to stay there. And all this leads into the kickoff weekends, which really are the focal point as the start of the season. We see that as the campaign launch moment and really a key point at that club level, how you integrate the players into your squads. And our start point for developing this is we used sort of a line called "It's good to belong," and this was really the impetus that we gave into our teams, and we developed the creative sort of from this moment. And really, it's about how being part of the club is really part of their lives, and it's good to belong with the club. It really is embedding you into the community and taking you through that level. And what we took from as well from the research is rugby doesn't just provide you with teammates every Saturday, it gives you friendships for life. And I'm sure you've all got many stories of players in your club who've gone through some of the youth programs or joined further on and really The club is part of the community, it's part of their lives, whether it's on the match day, away from it. They're all friends who help each other, both on the pitch and away from it. And you'll get to know each other. And there's many stories that we've heard of about you move into the area, someone takes you in, gives you the spare room, or they know the electrician that helps you move into your house. There's all these stories out there. That's really where the rugby club starts to fit into the community. But also we know, particularly within that 16 to 24-year-old age group, as they're going through those transitional life moments that Pete spoke about, particularly if they're moving to new areas, it's often a time where they can feel a lot more lonely. And again, this is where being part of a rugby club really helps to support them, being part of that community-based spirit and bringing all that through together. But really, it's all brought together by that sort of special type of friendship and camaraderie that's made by rugby. And it's these friendships that really make rugby more fun and make sure the players keep coming back, remain part of your clubs. And that's the bit that we want to bring to the fore through this campaign. So I'm going to share with you now a bit of a mood film. Do just need to point out this is not the final film. This won't be going out anywhere. We are creating a new one, which I'll talk a bit more to afterwards. But this is just sort of the inspiration that we're going through to really develop this campaign. So that's sort of the mood film that is our inspiration, and it's led us to the strapline of play together, stay together. So really drawing upon that fact that the rugby life exists beyond the pitch on match day. You are part of that club. It's a social outing as much as it is a game outing. And what we're going to be doing really with the film is highlighting the amazing rugby friendships that exist all the way from the professional level down to your clubs. And that's a really key point. What we want to bring through is the stories that embody that spirit of play together, stay together. What we're going to be doing is creating film, utilising a mixture of professional players, but also players from the club level. And we know that's a key element in reaching this audience. If they want to resonate with people who've gone through the same sort of stories as them, and really start to see that come through. What we're going to do is creating the film. We'll be utilising it across all the union channels, but it'll also be made available to yourselves, so then you can utilise it across your social channels as well. I mentioned that there'll be a number of professional players involved. So these are the players that we're hoping to record. They're all scheduled to be in international camps over the coming weeks. So obviously subject to them not getting injured or anything like that, being not there, but these are the players we're looking to involve. They've all been selected because of the friendships they've developed both on the pitch and away from it. And they've all got slightly different stories around how that's developed, how it supported them both on the pitch and away from it. So we're filming those over the coming weeks, but as I said, we're also out in the community capturing stories from the community game. And what that'll then be done is be created into sort of a couple of films that really start to bring those stories through, and something that's really going to resonate with our target audience. In terms of how we're going to reach them, so the 16 to 22-year-old, it's a different audience to reach, and these are the channels that really resonate with them. So YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, they're sort of the three main areas we're going to find them. And this is probably one of the step changes from last year, where, as many of you saw, we got sort of BBC News coverage or breakfast news. And it's sort of a step away from that, where this audience are less likely to be found, and really target them in the spaces where we're going to see them. So that's sort of a top line overview of that campaign. There'll be more sort of coming with it over the coming weeks, and we'll share that as it all gets finalised with you. So I'm now going to hand over to Rudy, who's just going to talk through the next stage.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy. Folks, so just the next couple of things we're going to go through are the role of clubs, and really what I'd like to do is start by asking a question. How can we better support the transition of young adults into the adult game? And what I'd like you to do, we're just going to put up a couple short videos, and while those are running, just invite you to share your experiences. Take the next couple of minutes to drop some experiences of things that you do that are successful, potentially stuff that you've tried that you need to relook at, because it's always good for us to learn from mistakes as well. So while we run these next two videos, if you could just do that for us, and we'll go through a little bit more about the role of clubs and then move on to speaking about positive cultures and positive development environments.
This competition is essential for us as a club. I would say most league weekends within a first team squad of 18, 14 or 15 of the guys have come through the youth and under 21 / under 23 setup. So it's great for us and key for us for retention and recruitment.
We have seen the disconnect between guys playing for the Warriors or school and then just going away to uni and not coming back. I think this is it's a very good stepping stone for them. Come back with your mates from uni, bring a few who haven't played for the club, guys who've not played for a couple of years maybe, come back, play with your mates, bring more mates, get involved in the club, just establish the link, keep the link, and then hopefully one day come back and play for the first team.
I think what it's good at is it connects, like sort of the boys break into that senior side and then the lads coming through up from the Colts, and it sort of joins them together, and that's a good foundation because you're going to want to come back and play with the boys that you've played with, which you may not have had the opportunity to, and that brings you back to the club, I think, and that's a really, really positive thing.
This has brought me back to rugby, yeah. It's really been fun because we haven't seen each other, because some people have been in uni, so haven't seen them for a while. But overall, it's brought everyone back and just having fun, literally playing the sport we love, rugby.
You've got the Bucks uni and you need something else that is going to bring other lads through who don't necessarily go to uni, and the bigger this competition gets, the more lads will come down, the more competitive it will be, and look, that's what we need in rugby these days. It needs to keep going and get on that level of football eventually, but we need these kind of little competitions that are going to help that bring that with all those boys through.
Fantastic, thank you. So folks, just I'm going to go through just 3 or 4 bits of inspiration or some points of successful campaigns that the different unions have run, but really what we're looking at 3 or 4 headline areas, and I see lots of great comments coming through on the chat. Things like communication is key, and it all stems back to relationships. So a couple events, looking at linking youth players going to university with clubs who share similar values and cultures. I think we run programs in Scotland where we really promote positive development environments, and that means that clubs, particularly those in rural areas who traditionally lose youth players to Central Belt universities and colleges, they can make links with other clubs close to those universities and colleges and say, look, we've got these young boys and girls coming down to university, we share a similar value set with you, do you want to make introductions with these players? And so the clubs end up creating relationships with other clubs. They may not even play in the same league, but they share the same cultures and values, and so they make connections for young people, and they're not able to track their progress and provide that little bit of support from afar if a youngster may be struggling down at university in a new environment. Jess mentioned it a little bit earlier on, so did Ryan. Club to upper school and club to higher and further education links, really, really, really important in this space. We want to encourage clubs and the communities that they serve to engage with those universities that their young people are going to potentially. And if they are moving away from home, engage with clubs, as I said, who share similar cultures and values and positive environments as yours. And make sure that when they arrive there, you have teed them up and introduced them with contacts that you've made. Tracking player movements is another big thing. In terms of from club to uni and back, I've suggested it, creating links with clubs. If we could just move to the next slide. And then just some further initiatives. So targeted and focused transition events. So under 20, under 21 games, a transition games and graduation days. And really these could be focused on, as the video suggested, keeping players engaged. So programs that we've seen run successfully across the RFU, ourselves, and down in Wales are early or late summer under 20 and under 19 transition events. So it's your last hurrah at getting involved in a club activity before you potentially head off to a university for the next couple of years, and really just strengthening that link. But it's also an opportunity to say, look, you may have had a strong peer group at under 15 and under 16, and a lot of those young men and women have moved away from the game. Let's get them back involved. And it may not be an event that's focused on a full 15v15 a full contact game. It could involve alternate formats, etc., etc. So move on to the next slide. Just good segue there. Alternate formats we found across all three unions have a really important role to play. I think in this day and age, we can really get creative about what we do, being mindful that at some point our seasons are really long, but what we want to do is we want to encourage things like summer touch rugby, etc., etc. Always safety first, being able to manage what we do. So the touch union, Papa John's Tartan Touch program, and the touch rugby program that colleagues at the Welsh Rugby Union run are all there to encourage community, family participation, and shouldn't be a barrier to anyone. And actually what we want to do through those events is the on-field stuff is quite important, but actually what goes on at the club in and around those events is probably more important, specifically around how we engage with young people. So what we're seeing is certainly in terms of what we're looking at doing, creating positive development environments and creating environments where we put real value on developing a culture in our clubs, and a positive culture is so important to this space. You know, in youth rugby, we see participation is paramount. Globally, rugby targets that. Our values, our cultures, our behaviors is something that we hold quite dear to us in rugby union. And we want to purport those. And we do a lot of marketing of those at youth rugby level. And what we really want to start doing is saying, actually, rugby is a lifelong journey. And the formative years of a rugby player aren't at P6, P7, P8. For a lot of people, the formative years of rugby player in terms of culture is that age group, 16, 17 to 18. You have people leaving school, young people transitioning into young adulthood. As we mentioned earlier, plenty other distractions in life. So it's about creating a home that young people feel safe in, and where performance may well, depending on what league you play in, be important to the club. But what we should be is overt around the culture and what the club stands for in terms of representing the needs, wants, and motivations of young people. Probably the most important thing. So what do we do to create a positive and supportive culture? Many ways to do it. I think what we need to do is recognize that most clubs we walk into, and certainly most rugby unions, we've got a couple words which are values at the bottom of every single slide deck. But what I'd like to challenge folk is to say, when you arrive at a club and you've never been there before, when you walk into the clubhouse and you see a set of values on the wall, on a notice board, or on a club prospectus, and you've been there for an hour, do you turn around and you say, actually, I've never been here before? Those 5 words perfectly describe the environment I'm in right now. If the answer is no, we've probably got a little bit of work to do. So we really want to make sure that our values, our attitudes, and our beliefs are there for people to see. We want to make sure that our shared missions, aims, and goals are there for people to see, and they're lived, they're live, they're visible, and they've got to be visible throughout the club. You know, so the behaviors that we instill in our junior and midi teams, does that extend beyond to our senior teams? And what do the culture of our senior teams look like when compared to our junior teams? Do we have alignment in that space? I think the most important thing, and it's come up over and over and over again, is communication. And communication really is key for young people. We want to really instill a culture of positive communication. We want to provide opportunity, but we want to also communicate that opportunity and give people choices to make, young people choices to make based on their motivations and not necessarily the historic motivations of clubs. And I think it's really important that we're able to find clear, exciting ways using different platforms to communicate what our culture and values are to younger people. And then make sure that we have senior members of the club, parents, coaches, and officials mirroring what those communications look like. So what we want to do is summer challenge. What 1 or 2 initiatives could your club introduce to improve the transition program? We've given you a couple ideas. Really would like to challenge all clubs to go away and say, look, let's pull together 1 or 2 initiatives, and hopefully this campaign will do as it says on the tin and provide you inspiration for that, and really look at delivering 1 or 2 headline initiatives through the summer that can improve your rates of transition and engagement with the age group 16 to 22.
Cool, thanks, Rudy. So the last bit I'm just going to talk you through is some of the resources that we're going to be providing to yourselves to support in the programme, and really everything that we've talked you through today. So the first bit is we're going to be sending you a youth to adult transition guide. That's going to recap some of the information we've talked through today, so helping you understand that audience, what are their motivations around playing the game, reasons for leaving, and just sort of bringing that out. Giving you some case studies and best practice examples that we've already seen, and as we've seen coming through in the chat today as well, some great examples there. So really bring those to life, getting those out there so you can see what other clubs are up to, what's working, and really as clubs, you're the best people to learn from each other on the ground, experiencing it firsthand. We're going to have a little section as well about supporting and recruiting that 16 to 22-year-old age bracket. So back to some of the stuff that Ryan and Jess spoke about earlier again, but giving you some sort of top tips as well around use of social media. How do you really target this audience? How do you communicate with them? Tone of voice, when do they expect to be communicated with? So bringing through sort of top tips around there. And some ideas as well about how you can help overcome the barriers. One area as a thought starter is obviously at that age, finance is a big challenge. Conscious it is for many people at the moment, but it's a real big challenge at that age. So is there something you can do around their membership fees to encourage them to retain in the club or make that step up, either forgoed or discounted for that first part of the season, really just to help them step into that game. And then the last bit is really making sure that your season kickoff weekends are relevant for that audience and making sure that it's engaging for them, making them feel comfortable when they first arrive, particularly if they are new to the club. Make sure they're not turning up and feeling a little lost as they arrive. They've got a point of contact as they get there. So really giving you inspiration about how you can bring that to life. We're going to bring as well what we're calling sort of the club culture toolkit. And this is really about taking some of those values that the 3 unions have, bringing those to life, but how can you deliver that within your club? Rudy's just mentioned sort of that summer challenge. So we're going to give you a bit of structure and stimulus about how you could run an in-club workshop. I think what we see as a key part of this is making sure you involve all parts of your club, whether that is the 16 to 22-year-olds, understanding how they see it, through to those that have been members of the club for a long time and how it impacts them. So you're creating that sort of one culture throughout the club and involving the parents of the youth group as well. They're a key part in that communication process, and how they act and support their children through the process is a really big part of that. And that'll be supported with a series of assets across sort of email and social. Also stuff that you can use around your clubhouse and around the pitch to really remind everyone that's there. This is the culture that we look to live to within our club, and this is how we can create that supportive environment that makes sure everyone is comfortable being part of our club. And then there's going to be a series of assets to support you in your season kickoff weekend. So this will be some activation guide and templates for social media posts and posters, email templates, press ads and press releases. And this allows us as well to bring through the National Lottery support within the campaign and how they're supporting us in bringing this to life. So a key part that we encourage as many clubs as possible to use these sort of assets and really bring that together and create one unified campaign across all 3 countries that shows we're all working together in this programme. So just some key dates around this. So we're looking to issue those guides I've just mentioned and assets to all the clubs in sort of mid-July. Then that national video that I spoke about earlier, that's going to be published late August. It'll go out on the union channels first, but we'll make sure it's issued to yourselves straight away so you can publish it and be part of that campaign. The more people we have sharing it, the bigger reach it gets, the bigger impact it has. So making sure we all share it at the same time is a really key part of that process. Then the kickoff dates for the new season. So for the Scots, it's the 3rd of September, and then Pitch Up For Rugby in England is the 17th of September. So they're key dates as the sort of campaign develops, but we'll be sharing more news over the coming months as all this gets confirmed and finalised. So I'm going to hand back to Dave now. Just going to finish off.
Yes, yeah, it might be a typo on that 22-23 season. Just to say thank you to everyone. I think it's quite a powerful message, the 3 unions coming together, supported by Unlimited, to really push this age group. It's not easy. If it's an easy solution, we know it would have been done already, and we're seeing things. So I think it's a lot of little things, and hopefully some of the things we've shared tonight on the chat, there's some fantastic ideas from clubs, and hopefully some listening to kind of Jess and Ryan bring those to life, and what are some of the things that really support that transition will help and just kind of stimulate a bit of thought. We're going to break out into the union breakout rooms now. So for Scottish and Welsh rugby unions, you'll go off with Rudy, and English will come with myself. So they'll pop up in 2 seconds. But just for that is, just say a huge thank you for everyone who's participated tonight. Good luck through the summer, the breaks and what you've got planned. And hopefully some of these events will be real positive. So please click now to join your next one, and all the best.